Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the top stories in the global economy. On today's magazine, Portugal's macro indicators are on the rise, and world nations challenge U.S. dominance over the internet. First, the headlines. U.S. President Barack Obama and Japanese Shinzo Abe held bilateral security and trade talks in Tokyo. U.S. and Japanese trade negotiators worked on a two-way trade pact seen as crucial to a broader Trans-Pacific agreement. Obama said the U.S.-Japan alliance is the foundation for security in the Asia-Pacific region as a whole. The leaders of two of the world's largest economies are likely to project a sense of progress on key issues by Obama's departure on Friday.
We represent two of the three largest economies in the world, and we have the opportunity, by working together, to help shape an open and innovative and dynamic economy throughout the Asia-Pacific region.
Your visit to Asia at this time is a testament of the U.S. rebalance policy, which attaches importance to this region.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro announced a slate of economic regulations to fight food shortages and the rising costs of living. Maduro declared measures for companies to boost oil production, as well as new fixed prices for basic products. He said he was setting clear ground rules on commercialization and distribution to fix the shortage of products. But critics are quick to note that price controls have been implemented in Venezuela since the 1980s and have generally been followed by staggering inflation.
In order to guarantee the growth of our social government model that assures education, health, food, housing, culture, tourism, living, and happiness, we must have a new economy, a new production model.
French turbine and train maker Alstom denied it is in talks with General Electric for a possible takeover, but its shares nonetheless soared 18%. GE may pay more than $13 billion for Alstom in what would be the U.S. company's biggest acquisition ever. The deal would give GE control of Alstom's high-speed TGV trains and rail signal technology. Sources close to the matter said an agreement may be announced as early as next week. Facebook's overall revenue grew 72%, boosted greatly by its mobile advertising business in the first quarter. Mobile ads represented 59% of its ads revenue in the first quarter, up from 30% in the year-ago period. Of Facebook's 1.28 billion monthly active users, 1.01 billion access the world's #1 internet social network on mobile devices. Facebook's newsfeed ads, ideally suited for the smaller size screens of smartphones, greatly boosted revenue growth during the past year. iPhone maker Apple also reported strong first quarter results as the company's earnings were up 7%. Israel's economy showed unexpected strength last month with improving numbers for employment, while tax revenues outgrew forecasts. Israel's finance ministry said indices of economic activity are at high levels compared to the second half of 2013. The rate of employment in the labor market continued to grow, tax collections continue to exceed monthly forecasts, and the capital market showed a positive trend in March. These numbers are in sharp contrast to the Bank of Israel's latest economic outlook, which lowered its 2014 growth forecast to 3.1%. Portugal's economic situation is looking up as the Troika lenders give it a final look over to see whether the cuts made are sufficient. But while the country's macroeconomic profile improves, many Portuguese continue to suffer unemployment. Here's the report by Joan Citruc and Daniel Roth.
3 years after its bailout, Portugal received a final visit of the Troika on Tuesday. The representatives from the European Union, the IMF, and the European Central Bank have begun their final review of Lisbon's austerity program. If they are satisfied with the level of cuts made by the Portuguese government, the country could be free from the control of its creditors.
Most macroeconomic indicators are improving. Whether on the investment side, we had a pretty good last quarter of last year, and we're expecting good results for the first quarter of this year, with an increase in growth. Some even predict a rate of around 2%. So this is an improvement.
There has been a rise in investment and the budget deficit is down, hitting 4.9% of GDP in 2013. But the austerity measures put in place haven't helped curb the unemployment rate, which still exceeds 15%.
The current situation is terrible. I have been unemployed for 1 year and a half and I cannot find work. I paid in for over 40 years. I'm 55 and I'm desperate. It's getting worse.
The recipe of the Troika and the IMF is very negative for everyone, except a small minority.
While the Troika's response regarding Portugal's standing is expected before May 5th, Portugal is returning to the long-term bond market, where yesterday they sold over $1 billion worth of 10-year bonds.
Joining us now is freelance reporter Batya Susharabi for a discussion on the wage gap in Feminomics. So Batya, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So hold on a second. The wage gap? I mean, are we talking about equal pay day? That was early in the month, right?
Yeah, it was April 8th.
Right, okay. So what's the situation here?
Okay, well, let me just explain what Equal Pay Day is.
Okay.
Equal Pay Day was established by the National Committee on Pay Equity as a public service event to show the difference in men and women's pay.
Okay.
Now, April was chosen because it shows how far into the year a woman has to work to earn the same amount as a man did the previous year.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, that clears it up. So, but why are we talking about this right now? What exactly is the situation?
Okay. Well, there's a stubborn statistic that women earn 77 cents for every dollar that a man earns.
Right.
Is this fact or is it fiction?
I thought it was more or less fact, but is it fiction?
It's fiction. According to most economists, this is fiction.
Okay.
So it's based on misleading data of the Census Bureau's median wage earnings of all men and women classified as full-time workers.
Right.
It is not a legitimate comparison because it's making it sound as if you're taking two
people who are men and a woman who are basically trained the same way in the same position, right?
Kind of. It's making it sound as if two people are working side by side, doing the same work, same hours.
Right.
It's misleading.
Right. Okay. Why is it misleading?
Because they're taking the wages of investment banker who works 40 hours and comparing it to a female librarian who works 37 hours.
Okay. But there are female investment bankers, right?
Yeah, but what's interesting is with the same qualification, she earns less. There's a 5% disparity.
Okay. And how did this describe this? I mean, how can they explain this away, the 5% disparity
Well,
that they claim
there's
that?
a few theories. One theory is that the man is more likely to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
So the woman is less likely to negotiate.
Less testosterone.
Yes,
Sorry.
let's go there. Let's go
Okay,
there.
yeah, so do say.
So, okay. And the second theory is that it's just outright gender discrimination.
Right.
The male employer views the male employee as the breadwinner. The woman is bringing in supplementary income.
Because the woman is supposed to be, presumed to be the mother at home with the kids.
Exactly. Which, interestingly enough, when a male is a single male raising his children, he is awarded.
Right.
She's seen as a liability.
Right.
He actually makes more.
You're saying if the guy goes home to deal with his sick kids, it's like, oh, you know, look at this
There's
guy, what a
sympathy.
guy.
The female is viewed
Whereas
as a
the woman
liability.
is penalized for
It's
it.
unbelievable.
Gotcha. I
So-
see. And in terms of what, I mean, hold on a second, but there's still that disparity. Isn't it still fair to say that there is discrimination, though, in the workforce?
Definitely. I mean, according to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, they did a study and they found that men earned more than women did in male-dominated fields and female-dominated fields across the board.
Okay, how's that work?
It's gender discrimination.
Right, but we have Janet Yellen. Okay, she obviously makes the same amount of money, you know, as her predecessor, right? I mean, even though she's the first female that basically sits there at the Federal Reserve. But at what level are we talking? I mean, like, to what extent is there an influence from above? Meaning, like, when women rise to really high positions, to what extent does it trickle down to the rest of society? Are you basically saying it doesn't really?
It doesn't seem to be. I mean, you have those one or two rare cases, but generally speaking, women earn less. For some unexplained reason, they earn less.
Okay. All right. Well, Batya Susharabi, thank you very much for bringing us those very important viewpoints. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the wake of Edward Snowden's revelations of U.S. spying on world leaders, Brazil hosts a two-day international forum on internet governance. The main focus is on how to control U.S. dominance in the digital sphere. Antine Leslie and Daniel Roth have more.
An international forum on the governance of the internet opened Wednesday in Sao Paulo, bringing together 87 nations, NGOs, and others. The two-day Net Mundial is focusing on shaping a future international body to oversee decentralization, privacy, and freedom of expression online. The revelations from Edward Snowden's leaked NSA documents brought global calls for an end to the United States' dominance online. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, who along with German Chancellor Angela Merkel had been spied on by American surveillance, openly challenged American dominance in the digital sphere.
Brazil advocates that governing of the Internet should be multi-sector, multilateral, democratic, and transparent. We consider the multilateral model as the best form for governing the Internet.
The United States Federal Communication Commission is reportedly planning to create new rules that allow for an internet fast lane, giving those with more money better access speeds, effectively doing away with net neutrality. At the same time, the U.S., long inflexible in sharing oversight, has agreed to cede control of ICANN, a San Francisco-based nonprofit body that issues domain names and addresses.
It is necessary and pressing that the organizations which are responsible today for the Internet's central functions support a global character, which involves judicial competence, accountability, and the consent of multiple actors, does not diminish the sense of urgency.
Even if the NSA's far-reaching surveillance program does not seem to be directly threatened by these reforms, Brazil's aim is to increase powers under the United Nations, including the Internet Governance Forum, which is to date a consultative body.
And we now take a deeper look into the stories behind the news in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel.
How's it going?
Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, always. We're traveling now to North America, where I just was for a quick vacation.
Aren't you lucky?
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen House of Cards, this series with Kevin Spacey on Netflix.
I've heard of it.
So it's all about American politics and how dirty it is and how the rich rule everything.
Right.
It turns out it's true. Princeton and Northwestern University had this study literally saying that the U.S. is an oligarchy, that it's a little far-fetched at this point to really call it a democracy.
Why am I not surprised?
Well, see, that's the thing. People aren't really surprised. People watch things like House of Cards and they say, yeah, that's probably true. And it turns out that it probably is.
It's not far from the truth.
You know, they've got empirical data now, starting in 1981 to 2002 that they were researching. So they're also not talking about in recent years when more and more people have become cynical about the government.
Right.
They're talking about in the last 30 or so years. And they're finding that most policies get decided by the richest 10% of the country and really rarely are decided by the average American.
You know, I just personally, I hear these things and I think to myself, but I mean, isn't it just more of the same? I mean, essentially, the world hasn't necessarily changed so much. You know, our perception of the world has changed. We presume that things are a lot more, democratic and liberal and free, but the truth is it hasn't really changed, has it?
Right. It's, we can point to moments where it seems like freedom was a real thing, where liberty, where democracy, these
really
kinds
existed.
And it seems, according to Princeton and Northwestern, that's not what is happening today, not in the U.S.
I see.
Also in the U.S., the middle class is shrinking, perhaps related. Canada now has the richest middle class in the world, beating out the U.S. My home
Indeed,
country.
I was just going to say, I don't know if this is really something you can talk about because you're Canadian.
Yeah, well, so the number one there's a few reasons. One of them is that Canadian education. Canada is the most educated country on earth.
Okay.
Number two is that the U.S. middle class wages are not growing. So the purchasing power of middle-class people is shrinking.
Okay.
Number three is that other governments in Europe and Canada do more to redistribute wealth. That is, take tax revenue and put it towards social programs and help people out, essentially. Essentially, they're saying the U.S. doesn't help people out enough.
No, in all fairness here, I mean, the U.S. has over 200 million people. Canada has this many.
Right, yeah, Canada is smaller than the population of California. But when you look at most of Western and Northern Europe, when you take Canada, it's maybe harder to manage, but it's something that's very possible to do.
Gotcha. Okay, enough about Canada.
And back to the U.S., actually. As I said, we're staying in North America.
Right.
It turns out Americans are not so fond of technology as once thought. While 59% of Americans say that technology is positive overall. When you get to the gritty details, 63% oppose drones in U.S. airspace, which is deeply, deeply ironic considering U.S. drone programs around the world. 52% oppose driverless cars. 78% are against lab-grown meat. People are really wary of the kinds of Google Glass already has had the most negative reactions. People walking around with little cameras on their faces. It's something that most people don't like very much, particularly in America, it seems.
Gotcha, but not in Canada.
But not in Canada.
Okay, well, thank you very much, at least not in Canada. That brings us to the end of this edition. Thank you very much, I'm Benjamin Chongafares. Send us your comments, give us your feedback, and join us again tomorrow.